Hello and welcome again to a simple word, just a word. I obviously am not at home. You would see me in our library in the Friary in Denver, but I am currently in Chicago giving a retreat to about 65 religious women. My calendar in the summertime has me doing these kinds of retreats with sisters, with nuns, and with priests. So that's where I am, and I'm happy to send something to you. When we look at the readings for this coming Sunday, we discover that it's about prayer and the importance of persistence in prayer. I remember years ago when I was a deacon, they sent me to one of our Capuchin parishes in Ohio, and the pastor had me preach at all the masses every Sunday for the whole summer. And I don't remember what the texts were, but one Sunday they lent themselves to my giving a homily on persistence, on this very thing that's mentioned in the gospel passages and so forth this weekend. I must have mentioned that word persistence at least 15 to 20 times in the course of the homily. And when we were unvesting, when Mass was over, this lovely woman came into the sacristy and said to me, that was the best homily I ever heard on prejudice. And the pastor, one of our friars, Father Wendell, who had a very dour sense of humor, turned to me and said, "You're going to be hearing those kinds of comments for the next 50 years of your priesthood." But it is important. Prayer, it demands that we be persistent. And rather than just saying that, let me put something into a bit of a background picture, if you don't mind. Two famous people. One would be St. Teresa of Avila, who is the church's premier theologian when it comes to prayer. And she was asked one time by a young nun, "What is prayer?" And if the young nun was expecting a highfalutin answer, she was very disappointed, because St. Teresa was very pragmatic and very straightforward. And she said, prayer is nothing more than a conversation. And if that's accurate, and she is a doctor of the church, so you have to pay attention a little bit more seriously to what these kinds of people say to us. Prayer, she said, is nothing more than a conversation. Well, if that's the case, then the next question, at least that I would ask, who's on the other side of this conversation? What is the picture? What is the image that we have of God that's running around in our heads? And I would quote the second famous person, and that's a gentleman by the name of Prosper of Aquitaine. Way back in the 4th century, he was a great defender of St. Augustine. In fact, he's often referred to as the greatest apostle of St. Augustine and all that Augustine wrote. Prosper of Aquitaine was not a priest, he wasn't a bishop, he was a layman, and he was a philosopher. And he ended up being a secretary to Pope Leo I, whom is often called Leo the Great. And he was the one who gave us the famous phrase that the lex credendi est lex orandi. Translated into English, the way that one believes is the way that one prays. So if I believe that God on the other end of this conversation is waiting to get me, that God is angry with me, that God is a punishing God, and all those negative images that so many people unfortunately have, then I'm not going to pray very well, because if prayer, according to Teresa, is nothing more than a conversation, we have to have a conversation with someone who we believe in. And this image of God business is very important. St. Augustine himself, way back in the 5th century, talked in Latin about the imago Dei, the image of God. Who's on the other end of this conversation? So, if I'm going to be persistent rather than inconsistent, then I have to have an image of God, a belief in God, a way of thinking of God and dealing with God, where I know he's listening to me, and he's interested in me, and he wants to hear what I have to say. And not only that, that he answers every prayer, even if the answer sometimes is an answer I don't like. Maybe sometimes the answer is no. And that's his prerogative. because sometimes when we ask for things, I think you would agree with me, we ask for things and we would be like kids who like to play with shiny knives and matches. It would be the end of us. And so he says no. But he does answer every question. He does answer every prayer. He does answer every need, because this is a God of love, compassion, mercy. He's created me. He loves me. He looks after me. He takes care of me. And that gives me much more of an incentive to be persistent, persistent, persistent. So I pray to God as we listen to these passages in the coming Sunday that we refine who is on the other end of this conversation, and do I truly believe that he's interested in me and is listening to me, and then that I grow in that particular image of God, and that gives me confidence to tell him what I would like him to hear, what he ought to give me and grant to me, whether, I like it or not, or he likes it or not, and have a positive image of him that fills me with the determination to keep on trying. So I hope that this is a little bit helpful for all of us when we listen to these beautiful passages from the Old Testament, the New Testament, and then the Gospel this weekend, all talking to us about seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you, pursue, be persistent, and then have a healthy image of God on the other end of the conversation. All right, so I wish you all the best for what's left of the summer, and I look forward to being with you again sometime in the fall. God bless you, take care, and we're praying for you, so I hope you're praying for us.